Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be exploring something really interesting, a groundbreaking new approach to myopia control called diffusion optics technology.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting development. It's really shaking things up, and we're going to be breaking down a recent study all about it from a scientific journal.
Yeah, this deep dive is all about this new technology, DOT for short, and how it aims to slow down the progression of nearsightedness in children. And get this, it's based on a theory that really kind of changes how we think about what causes myopia.
Yeah, that's right. Instead of just focusing on blur, DOT emphasizes the role of contrast.
So get ready to see myopia control in a whole new light, literally.
Okay, so the traditional blur theory suggests that blurry images, those that are focused behind the retina, that they stimulate eye growth, but this new contrast theory that DOT is based on, it challenges that idea.
Okay, so let's dive into this contrast theory. What's the core idea here?
Well, it suggests that it's not blur that drives eye growth in childhood, but the activity of contrast signaling pathways in the retina. And here's where it gets really interesting. Both a lack of contrast and excessive contrast signaling can lead to myopia.
Wait, so too little contrast. A and D too much contrast can both be bad. That seems kind of counterintuitive. How does that work?
It does seem a bit paradoxical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the key is in understanding accommodation, how our eyes adjust their focus.
Right.
For hypercopic or far-sighted eyes, accommodation actually increases contrast. So this might signal the eye to grow longer and become myopic, and then conversely, in already myopic eyes, accommodation makes the image even more blurry, decreasing contrast. So it's all about this delicate balance of contrast that seems to be really important.
So you're saying that it's the time average contrast on the retina that really matters. That's pretty fascinating. But how does this connect to these DOT lenses?
Well, DOT lenses are designed to subtly reduce contrast on the retina without significantly blurring vision. They have thousands of tiny light-scattering elements incorporated into the lens.
So it's like adding a very fine layer of visual static over everything you see, but so subtle that it doesn't actually interfere with your ability to see clearly.
Exactly, and this gentle reduction in contrast seems to help slow down myopia progression. The study we're looking at today, focused specifically on the effectiveness of DOT lenses in children.
Okay, so let's get into the details of this study. What did they do and what did they find? I'm all ears.
They conducted a randomized controlled trial with 128 children between the ages of 6 and 12 who were already myopic. Half of them were randomly assigned to wear DOT lenses, while the other half wore single vision lenses, which are basically your standard prescription glasses. The researchers tracked the kids for a year, measuring their axial length, which is the length of the eyeball from front to back. It's a key indicator of myopia progression.
So they were looking to see if the eyes of the kids wearing the DOT lenses grew longer at a slower rate than those wearing the regular lenses.
Exactly, and the results were pretty promising. The group wearing DOT lenses had a significantly slower rate of axial elongation compared to the control group wearing those single vision lenses.
That sounds like pretty compelling evidence. But were there any noticeable differences in the kids' vision, like how well they could see?
That's a great question, and it's one the researchers looked at carefully. They measured visual acuity, basically how clearly the kids could see at various distances, both with and without their assigned lenses. And what they found was that both groups had very similar visual acuity.
So the DOT lenses didn't seem to impair the kids' ability to see clearly, even though they were subtly reducing contrast.
Right. The children wearing DOT lenses were still able to see just as well as those wearing single vision lenses, both at distance and up close.
That's really encouraging. It sounds like DOT lenses offer a potential win-win, slowing down myopia progression without sacrificing clear vision.
But I'm curious about these lenses. How much contrast reduction are we talking about? The lenses used in the study reduced contrast by about 10% across the entire field of view. And keep in mind, this reduction is very subtle and not something that the wearer consciously perceives.
So it's not like everything suddenly looks washed out or faded.
Not at all. It's more like a subtle softening of edges and gradients enough to impact those contrast signaling pathways in the retina, but without compromising visual clarity.
That's pretty amazing. So to recap, this study found that DOT lenses significantly slowed down myopia progression in children over a year without affecting their visual acuity.
That's right. And it's worth noting that the children in the study adapted quickly to the DOT lenses with no reported discomfort or vision problems.
This is all incredibly promising. But you mentioned earlier that both a lack of contrast and too much contrast can contribute to myopia.
Yeah.
How does that tie in with DOT lenses and this contrast theory?
That's a great question, and to answer it, we need to delve a bit deeper into some recent breakthroughs in our understanding of the genetics of myopia. Get ready. for a fascinating genetic twist. Literally.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
Scientists have discovered that mutations in the genes responsible for color vision can actually increase the risk of myopia.
Hold on a second. Are you telling me that our color vision genes could influence whether or not we become nearsighted? How is that even possible?
Well, it all comes down to how these mutations affect contrast signaling in the retina. You see, these mutations can disrupt the normal functioning of specific cells called bipolar cells, which play a key role in transmitting visual information.
Okay, remind me. What do these bipolar cells do again?
Think of them as the middlemen in the retina. They receive signals from the photoreceptor cells, the rods and cones that detect light, and pass them on to the ganglion cells, which then send the information to the brain.
Right, got it. So how do these color vision gene mutations mess with that process?
Well, there's a specific type of bipolar cell called a midget bipolar cell. It's really important for high acuity vision. They're very sensitive to contrast because they have these center surround receptive fields.
Center surround receptive fields. What in the world does that mean?
Imagine each midget bipolar cell as having a tiny bullseye. The center of the bullseye gets input from a single cone, while the surrounding ring gets input from neighboring cones. The bipolar cell is constantly comparing the signal from the center cone to the average signal from the surrounding cones.
So it's like a tiny contrast detector.
Exactly. If the center cone receives more light than its neighbors, the ON bipolar cell is activated, signaling a bright spot. If the center cone receives less light, the OFF bipolar cell is activated, signaling a dark spot. This creates a kind of push-pull system that highlights differences in light intensity across the retina.
Okay, I think I'm following so far.
Yeah.
But how do the color vision gene mutations fit into all of this?
Here's where things get really interesting. These mutations can make some cones less efficient at absorbing light. So let's say you have a midget bipolar cell where the central cone is normal, but some of the surrounding cones are mutated and less sensitive. Even if the light falling on them is completely uniform, that central cone will appear to be receiving more light compared to its less sensitive neighbors.
So you're saying that even when there's no actual contrast in the image, these mutated cones could be sending out weaker signals, creating a sort of artificial contrast signal.
Exactly. It's like the system is being tricked into seeing contrast where there is none. And this constant background hum of spurious contrast signals could be what drives excessive eye growth, ultimately leading to myopia.
So DOT lenses are trying to quiet down this excess contrast noise by subtly reducing contrast across the entire retinal image.
Precisely. It's like turning down the volume on a noisy amplifier. The music is still there, but it's less overwhelming.
That's a great analogy. It's all starting to click into place now. This contrast theory could explain why some kids are more prone to myopia than others, right?
Absolutely. Those with these genetic mutations essentially start with a higher baseline level of contrast signaling in their retinas, making them potentially more susceptible to environmental factors that further increase contrast.
So things like near work or spending too much time indoors could be even more problematic for them.
Exactly. It's likely a combination of genetic predisposition and environmental triggers that ultimately determines whether someone develops myopia.
This all makes perfect sense. But hold on a second. Earlier we talked about how both too much A&D, too little contrast can be a problem. Doesn't that seem to contradict the whole idea of using DOT lenses to reduce contrast?
That's a great question, and it brings up a really interesting point. Remember those animal studies we discussed earlier? The ones that showed that diffusers, which reduce contrast, could actually cause hyperopia, not myopia, when worn in highlight levels.
Yeah, that seemed counterintuitive at first.
Right, but those studies were done with animals in very bright environments, much brighter than typical indoor lighting. One theory is that those highlight levels reduce noise in the visual system, so the lack of contrast from a diffuser doesn't create those spurious signals that might happen in lower light conditions. It's like the system is already getting so much clear information that a little bit of contrast reduction doesn't throw things off.
So it's not just about the presence or absence of contrast, but the degree and the context in which it's presented.
Exactly. It's a subtle dance between light genetics and visual processing. And that's what makes this research so exciting. It's helping us untangle this complex interplay of factors.
Okay, so we've got this new understanding of contrast and how it relates to myopia. We've seen how DOT lenses can potentially help manage contrast to slow down myopia progression. But I'm wondering, how do these DOT lenses compare to other myopia control solutions out there?
Well, there are other approaches like multifocal contact lenses and special spectacle lenses that create what we call myopic defocus in the peripheral retina. Instead of subtly reducing contrast across the entire lens like DOT, they have different power zones. The idea is that the blurry image in the periphery helps to slow down eye growth.
So instead of a uniform reduction in contrast, you have these specific areas that intentionally make things blurrier.
That's right. And while multifocal lenses have shown promise, DOT lenses have a couple of potential advantages.
Ooh, tell me more.
Firstly, DOT lenses provide clear vision across the entire lens. That means they could be more comfortable for kids to wear and easier to adapt to compared to those multifocal lenses. No shifting your gaze to find the sweet spot for clear vision.
I can imagine that would be a big deal for kids, especially those who are active in sports.
Yeah,
Having clear, unobstructed vision across the entire lens would definitely make things easier.
exactly. Another potential advantage is that DOT lenses don't rely on creating peripheral blur, which some researchers believe could potentially have unintended consequences for visual development. But of course, more research is needed to fully understand the long-term effects of different myopia control approaches.
It sounds like there's a lot we still don't know, but this research into contrast in myopia is definitely a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And it's opening up all sorts of exciting new avenues for research and innovation. Who knows what other breakthroughs await us as we continue to explore the mysteries of the visual system.
It really feels like we're on the cusp of a major paradigm shift in how we approach myopia. But before we get too carried away, I think it's time to take a quick breather. When we come back, we'll delve into the broader implications of this research and what it could mean for the future of myopia control. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey today exploring this revolutionary new approach to myopia control.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating field, and this new research on contrast is really kind of pushing the boundaries, of our understanding.
Before the break, we were talking about how this shift, from blur to contrast opens up all these new possibilities for myopia management. What are some of the most exciting potential applications that you see on the horizon?
One of the most promising areas is early intervention. If we can identify children with a genetic predisposition to myopia early on, we could potentially start them on therapies like DOT lenses even before they show any signs of nearsightedness.
So we're talking about preventative medicine for the eyes. That's incredible.
It is. By intervening early, we might be able to guide eye development in a healthier direction and potentially, reduce the severity of myopia later in life.
But how would we go about identifying, those children who are most at risk?
Well, that's where genetic testing comes in. As our understanding of the genes, associated with myopia grows, we'll be able to identify children with specific genetic markers that increase their susceptibility.
It's like a crystal ball for eye health.
In a way, yes. This genetic information combined with, other risk factors like family history and lifestyle habits could help us create personalized myopia management plans for each child.
That sounds like a real game changer. But let's not forget about environmental factors. You mentioned earlier that manipulating contrast in our surroundings could also play a role in preventing myopia. What might that look like in practice?
Well, think about lighting. Many indoor spaces have harsh artificial lighting that creates, high contrast edges and shadows. This could be contributing to excessive contrast signaling in the retina.
So you're saying we need to rethink how we light our homes, schools, and workplaces.
Exactly. We could design spaces with more natural lighting patterns using, softer diffused light sources and incorporating elements of biophilic design.
Biophilic design that's bringing elements of nature indoors, right?
Yes. By incorporating natural light plans and organic shapes, we can create environments that are not only more visually appealing, but also more in tune with our visual system's needs.
That's a fascinating concept. So we're not just talking about glasses and contact lenses anymore. It's about a holistic approach to myopia management that encompasses everything from our genes to our environment.
That's right. It's about empowering people with the knowledge and the tools to, take control of their eye health. And it's about advocating for changes in our built environments to create spaces that support healthy vision.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we've learned a lot about myopia contrast and the exciting new possibilities for prevention and treatment.
Absolutely, and it's just the beginning. As research continues to illuminate the complex interplay between genetics, environment, and eye health, we can expect to see even more innovative solutions emerge in the years to come.
So to wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
That myopia is not simply a matter of needing glasses to see clearly. It's a complex condition influenced by a multitude of factors, and, we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding it. But with this new knowledge comes a sense of hope. We have the potential to reshape the future of myopia, moving from a paradigm of treatment to one of prevention.
That's a powerful message. And as always, thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of diffusion optics technology and the fascinating world of myopia control. Until next time, keep those eyes peeled for new discoveries.